In this video, you are going to learn how to write an equation from a graph in slope-intercept form. So remember when we have been talking about slope-intercept form, we know that it is y equals mx plus b. We have talked about how you need to write the equation with the slope, which is going in the spot by the x, the m, and then our y-intercept, which is our b. So when we look at the graph, what we are trying to find are those two things. So I'm going to start first for this one with our y-intercept. So the y-intercept is going to be where the line is going to cross the y-axis. This is our y-axis, the up and down or the vertical line. So when I'm looking at my line, I can see that it crosses right here. And so my y-intercept, I'm going to write it as a point because it is a point, is at 0, negative 1. So then to find my slope, what I'm going to do is I need to look on my graph and I look to see where I call them like the nice points are. So the nice points, what I mean is going to be where the line is going to be on an intersection. And intersections like where on the graph paper, see how those lines come together? We want to find those spots because that's where the lines are, that's where the values are usually whole numbers. So when I'm looking at my green line here, you can see that I already have them marked with the smiley faces. See where the smiley faces are? That's where the green line is crossing right on the intersection of the graph paper. The y-intercept is also a nice point that I can use. So when I'm finding my slope, I'm going to use the points that I have marked, the smiley faces and the y-intercept. And then when we've made our graphs, we use the slope to do the rise over run. So we're kind of working backwards. So from this smiley face, if I think about my rise, I'm going up 3. And then if I go and do my run, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, over 5. And I'm just going to double check that again with the next one. Up 3 over positive 5. So if I'm looking at my slope, it's rise over run. My rise was up 3. My run was over 5. So my slope is going to be 3/5. So then I just need to put it all together. I'll write it down here. So my slope-intercept equation would be y equals 3/5 x, because that's my slope, and then minus 1, which is my y-intercept. So here's another example. If we look at this one, I do usually tend to do the y-intercept first, just because oftentimes this is another nice point I can use. So my y-intercept is right here. So that is actually what we call the origin, which is at 0, 0. So then if I'm looking at my line, if I follow along, you can see that from here to here, I don't really have any nice points. There's no spot where it really crosses right on the intersection until right here. So that's going to be the other nice point that I'm going to mark. So right up there. So then I'm going to do what I oftentimes call is drawing the stairs, because it looks like stairs when you're drawing it. So I'm going to go from this point and up. The rise there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I went up, so it was positive 5. And then it goes to the left 2, which is a negative 2. And starting out, I did notice that the line, see how it's going kind of downwards? If we think of slope dude, that would be a nice negative slope. So my slope would be a negative 5 over 2. And you can just keep it as an improper fraction. Sometimes you change it to a decimal, but oftentimes you're just going to keep it just like that. So negative 5 over 2. And then if I put that all together, I'd have y equals negative 5 over 2x. And then I could put plus 0, but when I add 0 to anything, it doesn't change it. So most often you're going to see it just like this, y equals negative 5 over 2x. So we've done a couple now together. So before I go on to any that are a little bit different, I want you to try this one on your own. So think through it, figure out the slope, y-intercept, put it all together into the equation. And once you think you got it, turn the video back on and see how you did. So this one I would have started at my y-intercept, which is right there, which is at 0, 2. Once I get my y-intercept, then I'm going to find my nice point so that I can get my slope. So following along the line here, I guess the one that I see would be right there. And then to figure out my slope, I'm going to do my rise over run. I can tell right away that it's a negative slope, so it's always good going into it thinking about like, is it positive or negative? So this is a negative slope. I go up this direction, and that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, so plus 4. And then I go to the left, the negative direction, 1, 2, 3, so negative 3. So my slope is going to be rise of 4 over the run of negative 3. So I put it all together, I get y equals negative 4/3. I can just put the negative in front of it because I know it's a negative slope, x plus 2. So this one is one of those little bit different graphs. So we have our positive, we have our negative linear graphs, and then we also have the two that are the 0 and the undefined. So if you look at this one, this is a horizontal line, and we have talked about, or we watched the slope do video, and he talked about how the horizontal line like this is 0 fun. This is 0 fun. So we know that the slope of this line is going to be 0. So, whoopsies. There we go. Slope of 0. So the y-intercept, if I look at where the line crosses, it's right here at this smiley face. See how the y value there would be 3. So 0, 3. So my equation for this is actually going to be y equals 3. And if you think about it, that makes sense because any spot on this line, if I'm looking at this line right here, any value, any x value would have a y value of 3, any spot from here to here, and it would keep going. So that's why my equation's y equals 3. So on this one, it's a little bit different because as you can see, it's labeled and it's going by 2s. So I got to remember that when I'm doing my slope and my y-intercept. So I start out with the same steps. I'm going to look at my y-intercept. My y-intercept is right here, and that is at 0, 4. And then I'm going to find my nice points that I can use. So it looks like I have one here and I have one here. So then before I start anything, I like to look to see what kind of a slope am I going to have. This is a negative slope. So I could even go and I could put a negative there so I don't forget. And then I'm going to draw my stairs. So here's where you got to be careful because when I count, a lot of times just want to count the stairs and go 1, 2. But I didn't just go up 2. I have to remember that it was going by 2s each time. So I actually went up 4. And then when I go over this direction, it's going to be 2, 4, 6. So a negative 6. So same thing here. I'm going to count by 2s. 2, 4. And then I'm going to go over negative 6. So my slope is rise of 4 over 6. So negative 4, 6. And I'm going to simplify that. 2 goes into both of it. So I would go negative 2/3. So my equation is going to be y equals negative 2/3 x plus 4. One of the big things that you always have to notice about a graph when you're coming up with an equation is what is the scale of the graph? Because a lot of times it's going up by 1s, but that's not always the case. If I look at this graph, see how it's labeled and it's going up by 5s? I have to keep that in mind when I'm writing my equation and doing my slope and my y-intercept. So I'm still going through the same process. I'm going to start with my y-intercept, and my y-intercept is right here at negative 5. So I'm at 0, negative 5. And then my slope, still do it the same way. I'm going to find my nice point. So if I go along the line, I see one here at 10, 10. And then I also have, looks like another one down here would also be a nice point. So I can see this as a positive slope. If I just look at it, I know that it's going up like this. It's puff, puff, positive. And then I'm going to draw my stairs. So it's going to be going up. Now, a lot of times I'll just count the squares, But since this time the scale is going by 5, I got to be extra careful because I can't just count 1, 2, 3. Because if I'm going from here to here, it's actually 5, 10, 15. So I'm actually going up 15. And then if I go over this direction, it's not just 2 squares, it's actually going over 5, 10. So it'd be plus 10. So same thing here, I'd be going up 5, 10, 15, and then I'm going over 10. So my slope here is 15 over 10, and if you can, when you get a slope like this, you can simplify it because 15 tenths, 5 goes into both, and that would be 3 over 2. So my equation, when I write it out, is going to be 3 over 2x, and then minus 5 for my y-intercept. So now that we've gone through quite a few, I'm going to have you, so we have 2 more graphs left. I want you to practice without my help first. So you're going to pause the video. Once you think you got it, turn it back on and check your answer. So here's the work you should have done. So you can see I started here with my y-intercept of negative 30. So there we go. And then looking at my stairs, I rose here. I used this for a nice point. So I did rise over run. Now on the y-axis, see how it's going by 10. So I had to count 10, 20, 30, 40. And then the x-axis is actually going by 5. See how this is like 5, 10, 15, 20. So when I go this direction, I went negative 5. So it was up 40, minus 5 this way. So then looking back here how I wrote it, I know it's a negative slope. Look at how it's going this direction. So I have negative 40 over 5, and I can simplify that to negative 8. So that's how I got my slope here of negative 8, and then my y-intercept of negative 30. And once again, I want you to try this one on your own. So pause the video. Once you've put some work and time into figuring it out, turn it back on and see how you did. All right, here is what you should have gotten. I will walk you through a little bit of it. So I first went, here's my y-intercept, so that's 40. And so that's where I got the 0, 40 from. And then I found a couple nice points here and here. And then from here, I did my rise over run. So when I went up, I didn't just go 1, 2, because I'm going by tens if you look over on that y-axis. So I went 10, 20. And then if I look at the x-axis, I'm actually going by 5s because this would be 5, 10, 15, 20. So I went over 5. My line is a negative slope, so I know my slope is a negative. So that's where I get 20 over 5, a negative 20 over 5. Simplify that to get negative 40. So that's where my equation y equals negative 4x plus 40 is coming from. So now you should know how to write an equation in slope-intercept form from any graph that you have. So basically, find the y-intercept. From there, find some nice points. And then you are going to find the slope from the stairs and doing the rise over run, and then just put it all together.